morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Thanks for spending these few minutes with me. We call it Coffee with PC. That's because I always bring my cup of coffee. Got some cappuccino I brewed up this morning in there. And of course, I'm in my Arsenal mug, my favorite English Premier League team. They had a few bumps in the road lately, but still want to support them. They're actually, this mug was actually given to me by Caroline's fiance, who is also a big European soccer fan. His team is Barcelona, and it's possible in the semifinals Arsenal could play Barcelona in the semifinals of the Champions League. So we shall see after next week if that will come to pass. But for now, I'm just going to enjoy this cappuccino and spend these few minutes with you, because I'm sure you didn't come here to get my deep insights onto European soccer, but nonetheless, just a few things of hobbies of mine outside of church world. In church world, spend a lot of time talking about reading, studying, trying to understand who God is through his revelation that we call the Bible. And we are trying over the next X number of weeks, we started maybe a couple months ago, to go through kind of the big story of the Bible. And we've spent a little bit of time in the first 11 chapters of Genesis highlighting some of those big things. But in chapter 12 of Genesis is where we find ourselves today. And this is where the big story of the Bible begins to taper down a little bit. Because in chapter 12, we meet a man by the name of Abram. He and his family will be the focus of pretty much a lot of the rest of the Hebrew Bible leading into the New Testament. Abraham and his family, this is the beginning of the people of Israel that we see here. And in chapter 12, we get the call of Abraham. And listen to what God promises him in Genesis 12, verse 2. He says, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples of earth will be blessed through you. This is an incredible blessing that God gives to Abraham. I will bless you. I will make you into a great nation. I will make your name great. All of these kind of big promises of God. And if we were like, hey, that sounds pretty good, right? I mean, who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want that kind of blessing from God himself? But I left out, you notice I said verse 2. I left out verse 1. And verse 1, before we hear those words of great blessing, we hear God say to Abraham, or Abram in this case, whose name is later changed to Abraham, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. Now, wait a minute. We like verse 2 and 3, right? We like the big blessings. But when we back up to verse 1, we see that those blessings of God are the result of Abraham doing something and thinking about what he has to do. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household. That's a lot. I mean, I think about maybe years ago when I left my hometown in Central Florida, and I left my family that I'd been very close to, my mom's family, extended family there, and I went away to college, which seemed like a long way away in West Palm Beach. Never kind of been down to South Florida before that, but came down, and man, I remember that was a huge thing. It was at times a little scary. As anybody who's ever gone off to college, particularly me being in kind of the small town family compound sort of thing, to go to a bigger city and a college and all of that thing, had a great experience there, wouldn't trade it for the world. But those first steps out of often we call it our comfort zone, our place of safety and security, a place of relationship, a place where everything is familiar. You kind of have your pattern and you have kind of your life set up. To leave that at any point, it can be a little daunting. It can be a little risky. It can be a little scary. And that's exactly what God calls Abram to do. He says, leave your country, your people, and your father's household. So all that he knew, all that was his past and his security, he had to give up. And notice God's instructions is, and go to the land I will show you. Now, when I left to go to college, and maybe like you, I kind of knew the college I was going to. And I had done all the paperwork, and I had signed up. I had gone down. I had visited the campus, kind of that preview day. I knew where my dorm was. I had kind of knew where the campus buildings were. I kind of had an idea. That made it a little bit easier when I first moved down there, because I was at least vaguely familiar with the area. For Abram, he's told to go to, he doesn't know where, just to the land I will show you. That is a much different thing. There's no timeline like, hey, you're going to be traveling for 6 months, 8 months. 10 years. He doesn't say, here's a map, here's specific directions to get there. No, he just says, listen, go to the land I will show you. Leave everything familiar and go somewhere else. Very vague. And the remarkable thing is in verse 4, it starts this way. So Abram left. So Abraham left. He went. He obeyed. He took a chance. Or dare I say, maybe a better way to put it, Abram took a step of faith. Maybe you'd call it a leap of faith even in this context, but he took a step of faith. He took this step that, hey, I don't understand. I don't have all the details. I don't know where this is going, but I'm going to do it anyway. Faith is vitally important in the life of Abram. We'll see this throughout the story of Abram as he becomes Abraham. We'll see failures of faith, absolutely, as all of us have. But in these initial forays, in this initial opening passage that introduces us to Abram, we see he is a person of faith. And it's confirmed for us how important that faith is because Abraham, shows up in Hebrews chapter 11. In Hebrews 11, I've heard it called the Hall of Fame of Faith. It lists all of these, we might say, heroes of faith, primarily from the Hebrew Bible, these people that we know their stories here, and says they did everything they did by faith. Now, I don't like that designation. You can go back and listen to our Hebrew series and figure out why, because I don't think the point of the Bible is be like Abraham. I think the point of the Bible is get to know God and be like Jesus. But that's another story that we'll get to down the line. But I do think it's important that we understand that in Hebrews 11, which talks about the faith of the patriarchs and others in the Hebrew Bible, how important faith was. In fact, in verse 6 of Hebrews 11, the writer of Hebrews says this, without faith, it is impossible to please God. Now, we live in a world full of information, and we live in a world where we like to have some manner of control. We like to know things before we do. We like to read. I like to research. I like to read up on things. So if I'm going to buy a car, I'm going to read up on the kind of car. If I'm going to buy, a new computer, I want to say, what do I want and what are my specs? And I'm going to dig into it so that when I go and make that purchase, I know exactly what I want and I have some control over it. Faith at times is the opposite. And certainly Abram's example of faith here is exactly the opposite. He didn't have all the details. He was just called to go. And he went. It's a remarkable thing that Abram obeyed God. Actually, later it says Abram obeyed God and it was credited to him as righteousness, which is pretty important. Faith is the currency with which we receive the blessing of God, because it was his act of faith to do what God asked that unleashed all the blessings that would follow to make him into a great nation, to bless him. And did you notice this? I don't know if you noticed it. I will make your name great. Let me point out a contrast. The last time, a couple weeks ago, when we talked about Genesis 11, the story of the Tower of Babel, if you remember, one of the issues there was the people got together and humanity said, we want to make a name for ourselves. We want to take control. We want to set the agenda. We want to do what we want to do. We want to do something remarkable and unmistakable so that people will know us. And we know that in that situation, all of their efforts to control, all of their efforts to achieve were thwarted by God, and they ultimately failed in that because they were in it for themselves. Here, Abram, he trusts. He doesn't try to control. He doesn't know all the details. He lives a life marked by faith, taking that step of faith and obedience. And God says, when you do that, I will make your name great. We still talk about Abraham as a man of faith. He's listed in chapter 11 as an example to us of the kind of faith that God honors. And it was that faith that God blessed. And you know what? For us today, faith is still a key currency for the Church of Jesus Christ, because one of the things that we talk about, and one of the reasons we talk so much about who Jesus is and what he did, is it's through faith in him, through faith in his life, his death, and resurrection, that we receive the ultimate blessing of God. That's salvation, forgiveness of sins, and a place in his eternal kingdom. And so the currency of faith is still very much the currency that God honors. It is impossible to please God without it. And so we invite you to join us as we learn more about this God who invites us to trust him, who invites us to have faith in him, and who has demonstrated that he is trustworthy by the way he kept his promises to people like Abram, later Abraham, and through the gift of his son Jesus. We just celebrated Easter. It was a great weekend of proclaiming the good news of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And really, every time we get together, as I said, that's what we're proclaiming. We get together on Sunday, the Lord's Day, in recognition of the first day of the week, the day that Jesus rose from the dead. And so we invite you this Sunday, this first day of next week, to join us in worship. 9 o'clock, we'll be here. We'll talk about who he is. We'll talk about what he did, and we'll talk about how faith makes all the difference. Faith as the key to unlock the precious blessings of God, that he will grant us forgiveness and life and salvation. So we hope you'll join us. I'm going to go finish up this little bit of my cappuccino, and I will look forward, hopefully, to seeing you on Sunday. If not, we'll catch up next week.